magic equals energy manipulation. That's the foundation. The supernatural abilities documented across every contemplative tradition for over 10,000 years represent one thing: consciousness directing forces that most humans never learn to perceive. When you understand that magic is just conscious control of energy, what religions call miracles, what science calls impossible, what skeptics dismiss as fraud, all of it becomes mechanical, repeatable, verifiable. What I'm laying out tonight will challenge your entire framework if you've been raised in materialist culture. If you believe consciousness emerges from brain chemistry, if you think the physical world operates independently of awareness, if you assume documented accounts of levitation and telepathy and materialization must be lies or delusion, tension will arise. Good. That tension marks the exact point where a lie you've been carrying starts to burn away under scrutiny. We've made videos on transformation practices, on sexual energy as divine force, on specific techniques from various lineages. This goes deeper into why these abilities matter as proof of what you actually are, because the mechanism that produces them reveals the structure of reality. By the end of this, you'll understand why magic proves divinity, why every enlightened master warns against pursuing these abilities, and you'll have a method to verify that consciousness moves energy directly. You can test it tonight. No belief required. I'll be referencing specific historical figures, masters who achieved what their traditions call full realization, founders of lineages that survived centuries, practitioners who became what their schools recognize as fully awakened beings. To keep this accessible, I'll simplify technical terms and use English translations for most concepts, only occasionally noting the original words these traditions used. The precision matters, but the language barrier shouldn't block understanding. Toward the end, I'm giving you a practical exercise that takes 15 minutes. You'll feel energy moving in your body through attention alone. That's your empirical proof that consciousness affects matter directly, which dismantles the entire materialist position. Then we'll go further, using that experience as doorway to recognizing what you actually are beneath the abilities, beneath the body, beneath everything that appears and disappears. The thumbnail says magic because that cuts through spiritual vagueness. What you're getting is technology. Precise methods that produce consistent results by working with forces conventional science hasn't mapped yet. Get ready. This challenges everything. Let's begin. Every mystical tradition documents abilities that violate consensus reality. Levitation shows up in Christian saints, Sufi masters, Hindu contemplatives, Buddhist adepts, Taoist practitioners. Telepathy, clairvoyance, appearing in two locations simultaneously, manifesting objects from apparent emptiness, walking through solid walls, surviving without food for months, controlling weather. The specific powers vary slightly by culture, but the pattern holds everywhere humans developed intensive consciousness practices. Either every tradition invented identical lies independently across continents and centuries, or something real gets accessed when you train awareness at sufficient depth. The documentation is too extensive, too consistent, too detailed to dismiss. Ancient texts describe these abilities with the mechanical precision of technical manuals, listing exactly which practice produces which result. A 2nd century text maps how mastering perception of elements allows you to convert earth properties to air properties, making levitation possible. A 9th century manual details the exact visualization and breath pattern that lets you halt time perception. A 14th century alchemical guide gives herbal formulas and energy circulation methods for physical rejuvenation, complete with dosages and timing. These are instruction sets. When a master in the year 800 halts the sun's apparent movement across the sky to extend drinking time, when multiple independent sources document the event, when the account includes the specific sound formula and mental focus he used, you're reading technical documentation. When a female practitioner in the year 900 generates enough internal heat through breath control that snow melts in a 15-foot radius around her body in Himalayan winter, and dozens of observers verify it, you're encountering repeatable phenomenon. The word for these abilities in Sanskrit is siddhi, meaning accomplishment or perfection. Beyond normal human capacity, yes, but entirely natural to consciousness that recognizes its own nature. The abilities arise as side effects of deep practice. No one pursues levitation directly. They practice concentration until awareness becomes so stable it penetrates to subtler layers of reality. Eventually, attention accesses the level where apparently solid matter gets perceived as vibration. At that level of perception, changing the vibration changes what appears solid. You're working with physics at a layer most never register. Think of water. Appears solid as ice, liquid as water, gaseous as steam. Same substance, different states, radically different behaviors. To someone who only knew ice, steam would seem magical, impossible, a violation of what water can do. But it's the same substance at different vibrational frequencies. Matter, energy, thought, consciousness, different states of one substance. These abilities emerge when you learn to work with the subtler states. The mechanism is life force, the energy that animates every living thing and permeates what looks like empty space, not metaphor. Actual energy moving through specific pathways, gathering at specific junctions, responding to breath and attention and intent. Chinese systems call it qi. Polynesian traditions call it mana. Every culture that developed body-based practices discovered the same force and mapped how to direct it. Magic equals energy. That's what we've been teaching on this channel for over a year, and it started a whole wave of creators finally talking about this clearly. When you see abilities that look supernatural, you're watching someone who learned to perceive and direct energy that normally operates beneath conscious awareness. The force itself is completely natural. The skill is in learning to work with it deliberately. Life force flows through pathways in the body, channels that traditional texts mapped in detail. Where these channels intersect, you get power centers, junctions where energy naturally gathers. When energy flows freely through clear channels, you get health, vitality, mental clarity. When channels are blocked or energy stagnates, disease, fatigue, confusion. Acupuncture works by clearing these pathways. Specific breathing techniques move energy deliberately. Certain body positions open particular channels. Attention is how you direct life force. Where awareness goes, energy follows. This is verifiable tonight with the practice I'll give you later. For now, notice that when you focus attention on your hand, sensation increases there. More blood flow, yes, but also more energetic activity. Attention directed the energy. Scale that principle through years of training and you get abilities that observers call magical. Traditional texts list 8 primary powers, becoming infinitesimally small, expanding to enormous size, becoming weightless to the point of levitation, becoming infinitely heavy, accessing anything anywhere regardless of distance, having intentions manifest spontaneously, lordship over natural processes, control over elemental forces. Then 17 secondary abilities, understanding all languages, knowing past existences, reading thoughts, seeing at vast distances, hearing subtle sounds inaudible to normal hearing, moving through solid objects, knowing exact time of death, immunity to fire and poison and weapons. Each represents consciousness operating at a specific layer of reality. The size-changing abilities demonstrate that dimension is perceptual category, not fixed property. The weight abilities show that mass results from relationship between consciousness and gravity field. The distance collapsing ability reveals that separation exists in space-time, but not in awareness itself. The abilities map how consciousness creates experiential reality. If you feel that pull to understand this more deeply, if what I'm describing resonates with something you've sensed but couldn't articulate, drop a comment. Tell me which ability you find most compelling or most difficult to accept as real. Your engagement helps me understand where to go deeper in future content, and it helps others reading to see they're not alone in questioning consensus reality. A master from the Southern Tamil tradition, one of the 18 legendary perfected beings that culture reveres as semi-divine, spent 40 years mastering rejuvenation science. Witnesses documented that his physical body transformed over those decades. Wrinkles smoothed, hair shifted from white back to black. Energy of someone in their 20s manifesting in a 70-year-old frame. He attributed it to specific herbal compounds combined with precise breath retention patterns that redirect life force from normal aging pathways into regenerative circuits. His students replicated the results. The formulas still exist in preserved manuscripts, exact ingredients and proportions listed like any chemistry text. Another adept from the same lineage, active in the 18th century, became known for manifesting objects from apparent emptiness. Rice, gold coins, healing ash. Multiple observers, including British colonial officers who came specifically to expose fraud, verified the phenomena. Their written reports describe watching his hands, empty, open, clearly visible as substances appeared in his palm with no possibility of sleight of hand given the angles they observed from. His explanation: matter is condensed energy. Consciousness can condense or disperse energy into or out of apparently solid form by working at the level before physical manifestation. The mechanism he described matches what quantum physics discovered 2 centuries later. Matter is mostly empty space. Subatomic particles behave as probability waves until observed. Contemplative science mapped this from inside through direct perception. Western science mapped it from outside through instruments. Same territory, different approaches, same conclusion. Consciousness and matter are not separate categories with consciousness emerging from matter. They're different densities of one substance, and consciousness is primary, which brings us to why magic proves divinity. If you are a biological organism that happens to be conscious, then awareness is side effect, passenger byproduct of chemical processes. Brain creates consciousness through molecular interactions. When brain stops, consciousness stops. You're a temporary pattern of matter that thinks it's a self. In this model, no magic should be possible ever. Consciousness can't affect matter because consciousness is matter, specifically brain matter. And brain matter follows chemical laws. Period. End of discussion. But if consciousness is fundamental, if awareness is what reality is made of, if forms are patterns appearing within consciousness rather than consciousness being pattern appearing within forms, then suddenly magic makes perfect sense. You're not in the universe. The universe is appearing in you. Not in your body, in your awareness. When you work at the level of consciousness directly rather than only through physical manipulation, you access variables that physical-only approaches can't touch. Levitation becomes possible because gravity is relationship between consciousness and mass, not intrinsic property of mass. You're changing the consciousness-mass relationship at the level where it gets established. Materialization becomes possible because objects are stabilized energy patterns, work at the energy level before stabilization, and you can condense new patterns into apparently solid form. Telepathy becomes possible because the separation between minds is appearance within awareness, not fundamental division at the level of awareness itself. Information is accessible without physical transmission. The abilities prove that consciousness is not produced by matter. They demonstrate that reality is consciousness responsive in ways materialism can't accommodate. And if reality is consciousness responsive at the level of extraordinary abilities, it's consciousness responsive all the way down. Your intentions affect what manifests. Your attention shapes what you perceive. Your awareness is the field in which everything you experience appears. That's divinity in the non-dual sense. Not a guy in the sky controlling everything. The absolute ultimate reality, Buddha nature, the Tao. The abilities don't make you divine. They reveal that you already are by demonstrating that consciousness precedes and shapes materiality rather than emerging from it. Magic equals energy, and you are the consciousness directing that energy, whether you've trained to do it consciously or it's happening automatically beneath awareness. The difference between untrained human and master who demonstrates abilities is not different substance. Same consciousness, same energy, just different degrees of conscious control over forces everyone has access to. Now, the critical piece. Every lineage that teaches how to develop these abilities also warns in the strongest terms against pursuing them. Why? Because powers are the most effective spiritual trap ever devised. They prove progress. They give you capacities others lack. They make you feel special, chosen, advanced. The ego that's supposed to be dissolving instead gets massively reinforced. You become attached to abilities, dependent on them for identity, distracted from the actual goal. The actual goal is recognizing your nature as consciousness itself, not as entity that possesses consciousness as a quality. Abilities demonstrate you're not limited to body-mind alone, that awareness can affect reality directly, that you have access to forces beyond normal capacity. But then the crucial move, those forces, those abilities, those experiences, they're all content appearing in awareness. They prove you're not limited to one particular form. They don't prove you are the abilities. You're what witnesses the abilities arising and dissolving. If you stop at the abilities, you've mistaken signpost for destination. You're still operating from the position of a someone who has powers, a separate self that can do special things. Useful self, impressive self. But the basic illusion remains intact. Individual entity separate from the whole, doing things to reality in which doing and things both appear. The warnings are emphatic across all traditions. A 9th century master who achieved the ability to stop the sun's movement, a founder of one of the most influential Tibetan lineages whose teaching system survived 8 centuries, demonstrated complete control over time perception. He used this power once to teach that even cosmic-level control is play, then spent the rest of his life warning students that attachment to power is bondage with special effects. The sun stopping arose from recognizing that time is content in consciousness. The recognition matters. The power is just demonstration that the recognition is real. A female adept from the 10th century, who became what her tradition recognizes as a Dakini, a fully realized female Buddha, attained flight, shape-shifting, and the ability to appear in multiple locations simultaneously. She taught these methods to select students, but forbade them from displaying abilities publicly. Her reasoning: the abilities arise when you realize the illusory nature of form, when you stop identifying as solid, separate entity. If you then use abilities for status or to prove something to others, you've fallen back into the trap. You've made the abilities real and yourself the special one who possesses them. The realization that created them gets obscured by attachment to what they can do. The paradox runs through every text on these powers. They prove you're divine, and pursuing them prevents recognizing divinity. The paradox runs through every text on these powers. They prove you're divine, and pursuing them prevents recognizing divinity. They demonstrate that consciousness controls reality, and getting attached to controlling reality locks you into being controller, rather than recognizing you're the field in which control and controlled both appear. So why study them at all? 3 reasons. First, they demolish materialist assumptions. If consciousness is byproduct of brain chemistry, then no amount of meditation should produce levitation or telepathy or materialization. But the documentation is overwhelming. Thousands of accounts across dozens of cultures over millennia, many with multiple credible witnesses, some with physical evidence that persists. Either we dismiss all of it as coordinated fraud spanning continents and centuries, or we accept that consciousness operates independently of physical constraints. The second option requires less fantastic explanation than the first. Second, they reveal the structure of reality. If attention moves energy, if visualization affects matter, if breath controls subtle forces, then reality is far more consciousness responsive than materialist science suggests. You're not passive observer in a mechanical universe. You're active participant in a consciousness-first system where intent, attention, and awareness directly shape what manifests. Magic equals energy, and energy responds to consciousness. Third, minor abilities are accessible to anyone as verification of principle. You don't need to levitate to prove consciousness affects energy. You can feel life force moving in your hands tonight. You can verify that attention directs sensation. You can experience the gap between thoughts and recognize the awareness witnessing thinking. These are accomplishments beyond normal untrained capacity. They prove through direct experience that the contemplative map is accurate. Some historical accounts demonstrate both the reality of these abilities and the dangers of attachment. An 11th century female practitioner, who would eventually be recognized as one of the accomplished ones, establishing a teaching lineage that influenced esoteric practices for generations, was a housewife ejected from her home at age 59. Destitute, she met an elderly woman who taught her practices involving breathwork, visualization, and subtle energy cultivation. Within months, she achieved the ability to transmute substances. She would take a handful of rice, perform specific breathing while holding it, and the rice would transform into gold. She used this to feed the poor, never for personal wealth. When asked why she didn't use the power to live in luxury, she said, "The power arose from recognizing gold and rice as the same substance at different frequencies. If I grasp at gold, I've forgotten the recognition and lost the power. It functions only when I remain as the awareness in which both gold and rice appear." That's precision teaching. The ability itself contains protection. It works when you're established in recognition. It fails when you fall back into grasping. Built-in feedback showing you where you actually are versus where you think you are. A master from the Tamil alchemical lineage, one of the 18 perfected beings active in the 14th century, created a statue using 9 poisons combined in specific proportions. According to texts and witness accounts, the statue remained poisonous to those approaching with harmful intent, but became healing medicine to those approaching with devotion. Chemical analysis in the 20th century confirmed the statue contains arsenic, mercury, lead, and other toxic substances in concentrations that should be lethal on contact. Yet millions have touched it over centuries with no poisoning. The alchemist's instructions describe using chemical combination plus life force infusion during specific lunar phases, treating the statue as living energy field rather than inert object. Whether you take that literally or see it as pointing to something beyond current scientific understanding, the principle holds: consciousness can imbue matter with qualities that persist beyond the creating individual. Another adept from the same tradition mastered what their system calls the vital point science, the map of junctions where energy channels surface close to skin. He could touch a specific point on someone's arm and they'd lose capacity for speech for exactly 1 hour. Different point, different duration, through precise pressure on mapped locations. British doctors studying his methods found no neurological mechanism explaining how light pressure on certain spots produced such specific systemic effects. His explanation: the points are gates where energy pathways surface, touching them with proper intent redirects life force flow. The effects are as mechanical as flipping a switch once you understand the wiring. This teaching survived as the martial component of Tamil medical science. The same points used for healing could be used for combat. Knowledge of how to restore energy flow required understanding how to disrupt it. The tradition maintained both applications, taught together with extensive ethical instruction on when force was justified and when healing was required. The underlying principle: the body is not simply flesh and bone. It's an energy system with specific architecture. That architecture can be mapped. Once mapped, it can be worked with directly. Healing and harming use identical knowledge applied with different intent. Most of this knowledge moved through direct teacher-to-student lineage. You couldn't read a book and develop abilities. Texts existed, but they were written in deliberately obscure language requiring oral explanation. A verse might say, "Raise the moon to meet the sun in the house where breath ceases." To someone outside the lineage, poetic nonsense. To a student who's been taught the anatomy, moon means left energy channel, sun means right channel, house where breath ceases means the central channel that opens when breathing balances. Raising means bringing energy upward through visualization and muscular engagement. The verse contains precise technical instruction rendered incomprehensible to outsiders. This protected knowledge from misuse. Someone with power hunger and no ethical foundation could cause havoc with these methods. The teacher served as gatekeeper, only transmitting techniques to students who demonstrated stability, ethics, and proper motivation. Often students spent years doing preliminary practices, building capacity and proving sincerity before receiving instruction in anything that produced noticeable powers. The testing could be severe. One account describes a student seeking transmission from a master known for exceptional abilities. The master gave him a bag and told him to guard it for 1 year without looking inside. The student agreed. 11 months in, curiosity became unbearable. He opened the bag. It contained a brick. He returned to the master ashamed. The master said, "You would have been entrusted with methods that reshape reality. You couldn't manage a brick for 12 months. When you can be trusted with nothing, you'll be ready for something." The teaching: abilities require stability most don't have. The powers themselves are neutral, but unstable mind with power creates chaos. Better to never develop them than develop them prematurely. If you're seeing how this maps to your own life, where you've pursued power or status or special knowledge for the wrong reasons, or where you've recognized that chasing abilities was actually avoiding deeper work, share that in the comments. And if this perspective is shifting how you see spiritual practice, hit the like button. That helps this reach people who need to hear that magic is real, but chasing it is the trap. Your support keeps this content coming. Some lineages used a different approach, deliberate boundary breaking to shatter conditioning that meditation alone couldn't penetrate. A high caste scholar, pride intact despite years of practice, was given teaching by someone from the untouchable class who had achieved full realization. He had to prostrate to her, take instruction from someone his culture said was beneath him, apply techniques involving substances his conditioning called impure. The practices worked precisely because they violated his conditioning. Consciousness has no caste. The divine appears informs the cultural mind rejects that his sense of superiority was the actual impurity blocking realization. These methods were dangerous in a different way. Not physically dangerous, but psychologically destabilizing. Breaking boundaries without proper preparation can fragment rather than liberate. The masters who used these approaches were highly skilled at reading which students could handle what degree of provocation at what stage. The Tamil perfected beings tradition developed a different angle: practical alchemy in medicine. Rather than emphasizing seated meditation exclusively, they combined contemplative practices with herbal formulas, mineral compounds, and direct work with the physical body as instrument of transformation. Their goal was liberation while living in a perfected body rather than liberation through transcending embodiment. They worked with mercury as primary transformative substance. In external alchemy, mercury combined with sulfur becomes cinnabar, which ancient science believed was the key to transmuting base metals to gold. These practitioners used this as map for internal alchemy. Mercury represented male essence, sulfur represented female essence. Combining them properly in the body's crucible created the elixir of immortality. Whether they achieved actual physical immortality is contested. What's documented is that several lived to extraordinary ages with full vitality. One master supposedly reached 300 years, another 200. Multiple sources describe these practitioners maintaining function well past normal lifespan. Their methods involved specific herbal preparations, breath sequences, practices preventing essence loss, and what they called total body renewal, controlled cellular death and rebirth. The process as described requires complete isolation for months. Special diet, precise herbs taken in sequence, intensive breath work, and what amounts to systematic dissolution and reformation at the cellular level. Accounts describe skin sloughing off entirely and regrowing, hair falling out and returning different color and texture, nervous system completely rewired. Some compare it to a caterpillar dissolving in the cocoon before reforming as butterfly. Whether this is literal description of physiological transformation or pointing to something we don't yet have framework to understand, one thing is documented. These were sophisticated experimental practitioners working with the body as laboratory for transformation. They achieved results that witnesses verified, but that current science can't fully explain. One of the 18 perfected beings active in the 15th century was known for constructing temples using what observers describe as levitation of massive stone blocks. The temples still stand. The engineering has been analyzed. Some stones are positioned in ways that even modern equipment finds challenging. His notebooks describe using sound vibration at specific frequencies to reduce stone density temporarily, making 1,000-pound blocks movable by one person. He mapped which frequencies affected which types of stone, creating what amounts to acoustic technology for altering material properties. Absurd from materialist standpoint. Less absurd if reality is fundamentally vibrational, if solid matter is frequency pattern, if consciousness can modulate frequency through focused sound. That's the worldview these practices emerged from: consciousness as primary, matter as vibration pattern within it. Which brings us to the practical verification you can do tonight. The most accessible practice is direct energy awareness. Sit comfortably where you won't be disturbed for 15 minutes. Rub your palms together vigorously for 30 seconds until they heat up. Now hold them about 6 inches apart, facing each other, and close your eyes. Pay attention to the space between your palms. You should start to feel something. Pressure, tingling, some kind of subtle sensation. Slowly move your palms closer together and farther apart, like you're compressing and expanding an invisible sphere. The sensation should intensify as they get closer, diminish as they move apart. You're feeling life force, the energy field generated by heat and friction, now responsive to your movement and attention. This is basic, but it proves the principle. There's an energy component to the body that you can directly perceive once you know to pay attention. That energy responds to physical action like rubbing palms, and it responds to attention. The more you focus on the sensation, the stronger it becomes. Attention is directing the energy. This is the mechanism behind every ability. Attention directed through trained awareness moves life force with increasing precision and power. Next level, with palms still facing each other, imagine breathing in through your left hand, breathing out through your right hand. Don't try to literally breathe through your hands. Create the mental image as vividly as you can while maintaining normal breathing through your nose. After several cycles, you should feel directional flow between the palms, a current moving from left to right with each imagined breath. This demonstrates that visualization combined with breath awareness affects energy flow. You're using imagination as tool to direct actual energy. The sensation proves the energy is moving. Your intent shaped how it moved. Now bring your hands to rest on your thighs and notice your body. You'll likely feel more energized, more awake, tingling in the hands spreading up the arms. You deliberately moved and amplified subtle energy using nothing but attention, breath awareness, and visualization. That's magic in the technical sense. Consciousness directing forces that normally operate beneath awareness. Magic equals energy. Energy responds to consciousness. You just verified both statements through direct experience. Scale that practice through years of training. Increase the amount of energy you can move. Increase the precision of where you can direct it. Learn the anatomy, which channels run where, which points connect to which systems, which visualizations affect which structures. Eventually, you're moving significant force through trained pathways, producing effects observers call supernatural. The practice does something else important. It proves to direct experience that you're not simply thinking meat. There's an energy dimension to your being that consciousness perceives and directs. Materialist framework says sensation in your hands is nerve firing, electrons jumping gaps, chemical signals. True at one level, incomplete picture. There's also energy flow that precedes the nerve firing, that you can affect through means nerve physiology alone can't explain. When you moved energy through attention, no physical mechanism connected your intention to increased sensation. Attention isn't physical. It's not made of atoms, yet it produced measurable effect in physical sensation. That's consciousness affecting matter directly. Same principle that produces abilities when refined and amplified. The reason this matters is verification. You don't have to believe ancient texts. You don't have to trust my interpretation of historical accounts. Test the principle yourself in 15 minutes. Either you feel the energy or you don't. Either attention affects it or it doesn't. Your direct experience becomes the evidence. And the deeper peace, the awareness that perceived the energy, that directed the attention, that witnessed the whole process. Can you locate that awareness? Does it have shape? Does it have boundaries? Is it the same awareness that's been present through every experience of your entire life? The practice gives you both levels, empirical proof that consciousness affects energy and pointing toward recognizing the consciousness that does the affecting. The first dismantles materialism. The second reveals what you actually are. Traditional teachings emphasize this. Every practice should function on multiple levels simultaneously. Physical level, generating sensation, moving life force, clearing pathways. Energetic level, building capacity to direct subtle forces. Consciousness level, recognizing awareness itself as what perceives and directs all of it. When all three levels integrate, you get what traditions call the perfected or accomplished being. Body trained, energy trained, consciousness recognized. The abilities arise naturally from that completeness. They're not pursued. They're not primary goal. They're confirmation that development is happening across all dimensions. One teaching appears repeatedly across lineages. There are minor abilities and major abilities, and the minor ones arise much earlier in practice. Abilities include knowing what someone is thinking without them speaking, sensing what's about to happen moments before it occurs, feeling energy in your body and others' bodies, seeing light or geometric patterns during meditation, experiencing states of bliss unrelated to external circumstances, understanding teachings you've never studied, feeling connection to all beings, experiencing time differently where minutes feel like hours or hours feel like seconds. These are accessible to anyone practicing consistently for months or years. They confirm you're working at the right depth. They maintain motivation because you're getting tangible results. And they're relatively safe because they don't give enough power to cause serious harm. Major abilities are a different category entirely. Levitation, appearing in two places simultaneously, manifesting objects, complete control over bodily functions including stopping the heart and restarting it, immunity to poison and fire, knowing exact time of death, seeing past existences with complete clarity, extending lifespan. These require extraordinary capacity, total energetic transformation, and absolute ethical foundation. The lineages that teach them traditionally require decades of preliminary work, specifically because premature development of major abilities with unstable mind creates dangerous situations. Accounts exist of practitioners who developed powers before developing wisdom. They used abilities to gain wealth, seduce partners, dominate others, win conflicts. In every case, the texts record it ended badly. The powers either disappeared, leaving them desperate to regain them, or the powers remained but led to corruption, paranoia, and eventual self-destruction. The mechanism that creates abilities requires ethical foundation, or it becomes unstable. Why? Because the abilities arise from seeing through the illusion of separation. When you recognize that all forms are consciousness temporarily appearing as distinct, you gain access to the level of reality where distinctions haven't yet solidified. At that level, changing form is like rearranging furniture in a room. But if you then use that access to benefit yourself at expense of others, you've reasserted the separation. You've claimed there is a self here and others there. The recognition that created the access collapses. The abilities go with it. The ethics aren't imposed from outside as commandments. They're built into the mechanism. Abilities function when you're established in recognizing non-separation. They malfunction when you operate from separation. It's mechanical feedback showing where your recognition actually is versus where you think it is. That's why traditions emphasize recognition over abilities. If you stabilize in recognizing yourself as awareness in which all forms appear, abilities may arise or may not. If they do, they're not threatening because you're not attached. If they don't, you're not missing anything because you've already recognized what you are. But if you chase the abilities as goal, you're reinforcing the separate self, making the recognition that produces them impossible to stabilize. It's built-in protection. The powers protect themselves from misuse by only functioning when misuse becomes impossible. If you've stayed with me this far, if you're seeing how abilities both prove consciousness is primary and how pursuing them is the trap, and if you're ready to go deeper into what you actually are beneath all abilities and experiences, subscribe to the channel. We're putting out multiple videos weekly on recognition, on practices, on dismantling the lies you've been carrying. Drop a comment telling me what clicked for you in this video, and I'll know what territory to explore next. This work matters. You being here matters. Your recognition serves everyone because consciousness recognizing itself anywhere affects the whole field. Now the skeptical position. Maybe all of this is fraud, delusion, exaggeration, misinterpretation. Maybe consciousness is brain activity and none of these abilities actually occur. That position requires explaining why thousands of intelligent, critical observers across dozens of cultures over millennia all reported the same categories of phenomena. Why detailed training manuals exist describing exactly how to produce specific effects. Why the abilities show up in contemplative traditions that otherwise have nothing in common. Hindu, Buddhist, Taoist, Sufi, Christian mystic, indigenous shamanic. Why practitioners today still report minor abilities arising naturally from intensive practice. The skeptical explanation becomes more elaborate than the straightforward one. Consciousness is fundamental, matter is its expression, and training consciousness to operate at subtler layers gives access to forces untrained consciousness doesn't register. You don't have to believe it. Test it. The practice I gave you is completely safe and produces verifiable results for most people within one session. If you feel the energy, if attention clearly affects it, you have empirical data that something beyond nerve firing is happening. If you don't feel anything, maybe you need more practice, or maybe you're one of the people who doesn't respond to this particular technique. But hundreds of thousands of meditators have verified the basic principle. Life force is real, attention moves it, the body has an energy dimension that responds to consciousness. From there you can explore deeper if interested. Or you can simply note that consciousness affecting energy directly means materialism is incomplete and return to whatever recognition practice speaks to you. The point was never to make you someone with powers. The point was using abilities as evidence that consciousness is primary. Bringing this to integration, magic proves you're divine by demonstrating that consciousness shapes reality. But the divinity it proves is not the one who possesses powers. It's the awareness in which powers, the one wielding them, and the effects produced all appear and dissolve. When you rubbed your palms together and felt energy between them, notice what actually happened. There was sensation. There was awareness of sensation. There was the interpretation, I am feeling energy. Break it down. The sensation is vibration appearing in awareness. The I who feels it can't be located. Try to find who's feeling it, and you find more sensations and thoughts appearing in the same awareness. The awareness itself is empty, clear, present, unchanging even as sensations change. That awareness is what you actually are, not the body that has energy, not the mind that interprets it, not even the consciousness that directs it. The awareness in which body, mind, energy, and the entire play of experience appears. The abilities prove you're not limited to body-mind alone. The recognition reveals you're not limited at all. Unlimited awareness temporarily experiencing limitation, like infinite ocean experiencing itself as wave. The wave can develop abilities, moving in particular ways, creating specific patterns, affecting other waves. Impressive for a wave, but the wave's true nature is ocean. Recognition of that dissolves the fundamental suffering of believing yourself to be only the wave. Study the magic if it interests you. Practice the techniques. Verify that consciousness moves energy. Develop minor abilities if they arise naturally, but don't stop there. Use the abilities as confirmation that you're not what you appear to be, then keep going until you recognize what you actually are. The texts that describe abilities also describe going beyond them. Final recognition is called the natural state in some traditions. Effortless being prior to any attainment, including supernatural attainment. In that state, abilities may function through the body, mind, or not. Doesn't matter. The one who would be proud of abilities is recognized as a thought appearing in awareness. The one who would use them to dominate is seen as a contraction of infinite space into belief in limitation. What remains is simple presence, awareness being aware, forms appearing and dissolving, no separation between the watching and what's watched because both are movements of the same consciousness. That's what magic proves when you follow it all the way through. Not that you can fly or read minds or manifest gold, though those may occur. That you are the consciousness in which all phenomena arise. That consciousness is not produced by body, but expresses through it. That you were never the limited entity you believed yourself to be. Recognition is available right now because you are always already what you're seeking to become. The practice tonight. Feel the energy between your palms for empirical proof that consciousness affects matter. Then ask, who is aware of the energy? Don't settle for conceptual answer. Look directly for the one who's aware. When you can't find a separate self who's only experiencing appearing in awareness, you've begun the recognition that every ability points toward. The power to move energy with attention is minor magic. The recognition that awareness itself is what you are is the only freedom that matters. Pursue that. Use everything else as confirmation you're heading in the right direction, but don't mistake the signposts for the destination. You're not becoming divine through practice. You're recognizing divinity as your nature. Always has been, couldn't be otherwise. Waiting only for the forgetting to collapse so the obvious becomes unavoidable. Magic proves it. Consciousness is secondary, and you are the consciousness in which this entire appearance arises and dissolves like clouds in sky.